G'day folks, my name's Ashley and welcome to Groundspeed Gaming. This is the first video for Groundspeed Gaming and it's a channel I've just created recently because primarily I'm going to be focusing on aviation videos, hence the name Groundspeed, because that's one of the most important elements of flight navigation. Occasionally I'll do some non-aviation stuff, but primarily it's going to be aviation stuff, so I just wanted to create a whole new channel for that. And this is the first game, as you can see on that aircraft in on the paint scheme. It's AirportSim, and it's a good little simulator, this one. So we're currently at Key West Airport, and I'm going to simulate fueling a 737. Now, this is one of the things I've actually done in real life for many years, and it's actually pretty straightforward. It's actually not a bad job. You might think, that's yucky, it's working outside, it's noisy, it's smelly, you know. It is, it's noisy, it's smelly. The fuel smells awful, but it's actually pretty cool. I've also worked as a flight dispatcher, which also was another great job. However, the only thing with a flight dispatcher is you're not at the airport and you're not working around aircraft. It is an office job. It doesn't matter how you spin it. As cool a job as it is, doing all the flight planning for all the flights, you're generally not at the airport and not around aircraft, and that's the downside. With this job, you're required to be around the aircraft, and that's part of the attraction to the job. So as you can see on the forward left here, we've got the 737 that's going to be pulling up. He's going to be pulling up by the fence at the far end there, so we'll get going now. These other two aircraft, they're just sitting here stationary, probably overnight aircraft. And in reality, I haven't driven a fuel truck before. I use a fuel cart and a tug or a vehicle to tow aircraft, to tow a fuel cart around. I work in a place where in wintertime it gets very snowy and very icy and quite cold, and I don't like the idea of driving something this big and heavy on ice in close proximity to aircraft. And so that's my main reason for actually avoiding driving trucks. I don't like it, and not to mention the fact that ramps are very, well, they don't have a lot of room once you park all the aircraft at all the gates, and with all the ground equipment parked around, there's not a lot of room to manoeuvre, so it's actually quite challenging to manoeuvre these trucks on the ramp. But if you use a fuel cart and a small tug or a small vehicle, it's a lot easier to manoeuvre. And the fuel cart you can push by hand just to manoeuvre it if need be. So as this aircraft pulls up at the gate, you can see the beacon lights are still on, so we can't go behind it yet, so we can't go much closer. Turn the volume down a bit, it's a bit loud. Engines are loud. Okay, as you can see, the beacon lights are off, the cones are out, and it looks like there's some trucks behind the main wheels, but there would also be some trucks in front of the nose wheel as well. So the fact that the cone's out, that means someone's walked behind the aircraft, meaning the engines have been shut down. Even though it looks like it's still running, it's not. Just pull into this green box here. In reality, I don't think you'd park this large truck in this spot right here, because where this is actually going to be the main thoroughfare for the ramp guys with regards to their belt loaders, baggage carts, tugs, pushback, because all their cargo bins at the front and the back one are on this side, the same side. So I don't want to get in their way, and they don't want to get in your way. So, but anyway, that's okay. We've got to keep the engine running on the truck because it powers the pump, which is going to pump the fuel to the actual aircraft from the truck. So in order to do this safely, we need to put chocks in front and behind the wheel. It doesn't depict that, but that's what you would do in real life. And even before we set up, we would pull out this electronic device, and in reality, it would actually tell you not only how much fuel you've got to put on board, so that's apparently what's on board. We wouldn't find that out until we open the panel. How much we need to add, but also it'll give you the actual registration number, the tail number of the actual aircraft, and there'll be an area where you have to enter the ship number. Okay, here's an example. American Airlines 737. It's set up here at Key West in a slightly different position, but similar to the location of the AirportSim. And as you can see, they've got the tail number, 902 November. And underneath that is a 3-letter code, 3 Juliet Lima, which is correct. That's a real life ship number. So that's the ship number. It starts with number 3. All 737s at American Airlines start with number 3. They're also located on the nose as well. So it's a 737-800, and it is 3 Juliet Lima. And that's the ship number we enter as fuelers into the electronic device. I believe they have that ship number on their aircraft so that when you go to fuel an aircraft, you have to get out and check the tail number and get the ship number and enter that into the electronic device to confirm that you're on the correct aircraft, which is to prevent you from fueling the wrong aircraft, which has happened in the past. So they don't want that to happen, because that sort of stuff just causes additional delays potentially. So this is the grounding cable. I've just grabbed it from the truck, and we'll just connect that. So what that does is that makes the static charge between the truck and the aircraft the same. So when you go to hook up the hose, there's not going to be any spark jumping between the hose and the aircraft, because you don't want any sparks jumping where the fuel flows. Also, that's actually where you ground Airbuses. 737s are grounded right about there where that white dot is in the middle. But, that's fine. The principles are the same. And normally you'd grab a hose, not a hose, a ladder. And you'd set your ladder up here. Right, you climb up the ladder, open the panel, and you check that. I'd actually normally check that before I even pull the equipment out, because it doesn't happen often, but occasionally an aircraft will pull up, you'll open the fuel panel, and you actually don't need to add any fuel. It's rare, but it does sometimes happen. So you'll check it before you actually pull the equipment out. So what we're going to do is, that's how much we need to add. So what I'll do, I'll show you a quick trick as to how you calculate the fuel to put on board, because you've got to split it between 3 tanks. All you need to do for the 737, this applies to at least the 800s and the 900s, maxes and non-maxes. Generally with 737s, they hold up to 8,600 pounds of fuel in each wing. Now, with regards to fuel, what you need to know is that fuel density is a real thing, meaning when the temperature is hot, the density of the fuel increases. The density decreases, so it takes up more room. I had that backwards. So when it's hotter, each gallon of fuel takes up a little bit more room. But the physical size of the fuel tank doesn't change. So in summer, you generally can't fit as much fuel in each wing compared to really cold winters. So I've found in the middle of summer, putting 8,600 pounds in each wing is not always doable. But I found 8,500 about 99.9% of the time actually works in summer. So just generally, I always put 8,500 pounds in the wing, not 8,600, if it needs that much fuel. So what I'll do in this particular case, I'll just put in the total amount, which is 44,750, which is a lot of fuel. That's kind of the high end of an Indianapolis to, actually you wouldn't even need this much to go to Seattle. I'll put the total fuel in, and then I'll minus 8,500, minus an additional 8,500. Or you could just get the total and minus 17,000, and whatever remains is what goes in the center tank. It's that simple. That's the most complicated calculation you have to do for fueling. Well, actually, when one of the gauges is in op, that's a bit more difficult, but it's still not hard. Okay. So we need to put these levers. They're supposed to be a safety feature. So you set it to what the limit is, so where you want the fuel to stop flowing. The reality is no one ever uses these because they're not reliable. You do not trust any of these built-in safety features to stop the fuel flowing if it reaches a certain limit. You need to keep an eye on these gauges while you're fueling, and then just shut them off as necessary when it's time to shut them off. So I'll just let that fuel for a bit, because we've got to put 27,000 in the middle there, so just bear with me. We'll just get out of here. Just quickly go over here. We don't actually use a lever like this to turn the fuel flow on. Normally there's a meter. You'd check the meter. You'd reset the meter, because it won't flow unless you reset the meter. It's like a mini computer. And you'd hold onto a wire cable with a trigger on it. And what that is, it's called a dead man switch. So the fuel will stop flowing if you let go of the trigger. And for whatever reason, if you need to stop fueling immediately, you just simply let go of the trigger and it'll stop fueling. I can see why they didn't want to simulate that in this game, which is fine, because then you'd have to hold down the space bar or something just for the fuel to flow, and that'd be kind of annoying. All right, we've got plenty there. So we actually need 27,750. Obviously, if we were to flow the fuel, it'll stop it at that. But anyway, I'll just open this one, and this one. Now, obviously in this game, center tank's not fueling at the moment. In reality, it actually would flow at the same time. And that's how you get a lot of flights done in a shorter period of time, because it saves quite a few minutes fueling the center tank at the same time. And it does it just fine. The most gallons per minute I managed to get on a 737-900, I don't remember if it was a max or not. I think it was 412 gallons per minute, but that was with all 3 tanks open. And as you close each individual tank, the fuel rate slows down. And this one always lags behind. Tank number 1 always lags behind because we're hooked up to tank number 2. We're hooked up to tank number 2, and so by the time the fuel gets into the pipes, crosses across to the other side of the aircraft and gets into the fuel tank on the left side, this one's gone further ahead. So this one always lags behind. So tank number 2 always fills up first. But it's just the way it's physically designed. So we got 27,750. Also, these gauges do not have decimal readings in real life at all. In fact, it only goes up in increments of 10 pounds. Because each gallon of jet fuel, I think it weighs 6.8 pounds. So it goes up in increments of 10. So it'd be kind of pointless to go up in increments of 1 pound or even have decimal readings. So I'm hoping the game manufacturers of AirportSim will actually correct that or just change that so that they remove the decimal readings. That'd be kind of cool. This fuels faster than it does in real life, so I can understand why they'd simulate not real life time to take the fuel, because for me to do a Seattle flight takes 15 minutes, the Indianapolis to Seattle, and 737-900 non-max typically takes about 33 to 34,000 pounds, and it takes me 15 minutes. I don't think you want to do this for 15 minutes straight, so I can see why they fuel this at a faster rate. So that's cool. And not having to simulate holding a deadman switch, that'd be pretty annoying too. And setting up ladders and that. These lights, you can actually push them in real life to test to see if the lights work. Obviously the light's working. And just like a Boeing in real life, the light turns on when the tank is open, and it shuts off when the fuel tank is closed. Airbuses, they're actually the opposite. So what they'll do is, you'll open the fuel tanks and the lights will turn on when the fuel tank is full. So they just, same idea, just the opposite. This thing is a 3-stage lever, so it moves up and down. And so you move it up to test the gauges. So you move it up, and what it would do is it'll turn all the LED readings to 8s, so you can see which LEDs are working, which ones are not. And also with this fuel panel door, there's a little lever that holds it open. It's got a little switch on it, and that switch needs to be pushed down, and that's what allows the power to it get to the fuel panel here. And without it, obviously, power to the fuel panel, you can't fuel it because it won't open the fuel flow gauges, the fuel valves. But if for whatever reason that switch holding the door open is not working, you can hold this down and it bypasses that switch, so it'll still get power to the fuel panel. The only main discrepancy with the 737, at least, I don't know about other Boeings, but the 737, if there's no APU running or if there's no ground power plugged in, you can't actually fuel it. All other aircraft types, including Airbuses, ERJs and CRJs, you can use battery power to power the fuel panel, and you can fuel them without any ground power or any APU running. 737, you cannot. You have to have some sort of power source powering it. That's the only shortfall of the 737. Other than that, the fuel system on the 737 is actually probably the best fuel system out of all of them. The CRJ 200s, the fuel system needs a bit of work. 700's better, but it still needs a bit of work as well for the CRJs. The CRJ 900 seems better, with the CRJs, that they tend to, when you shut them off, they tend to just, the fuel levels tend to roll back a little bit. So once you shut it off, you got to sit there for a couple of minutes. If you do it properly, sit and watch the numbers drop again. You're like, okay, I've got to add some more. So, but the 737, out of all of aircraft that I feel, that's the best fuel system, with the exception for the fact that it needs some sort of power source in order to fuel it. So you can't do it with battery power alone. That's the only shortfall. It's the easiest operating system as well, because it's individually open or close each individual fuel valve. And with regards to fuel distribution, the only time you put fuel in the center tank is if you're going to take more than what the wings hold. So with regards to the 737, obviously 17,200, 8,600 in each wing is the max the wings will hold. So if you're not going to have any more than 17,200, you actually won't put any fuel in the center tank. Anything beyond that, you put in the fuel in the center tank. So you only put it in the center tank if you're going to fill the wings first. And that applies across the board to all aircraft types. There we go. 750. Oh, there we go. 750. Let's have a look at that. Oops, let's get out of that. And what does it say? There we go. We've got enough fuel on board. Oh, it didn't register that we could connect to the grounding cable. That's going to be a problem, because that's going to think we never connected it, even though we did. Okay. So we'll simulate letting go of the dead man switch, the trigger. So that's the equivalent of letting go of the trigger. You'd look at a meter. It tells you how much fuel you just put on board. You'd note that down in the paperwork. Before we disconnect the hose, in real life what you would do is, obviously we've let go of the dead man switch by releasing that, or closing that lever. The only problem with closing the valves as you're fueling, when you've closed all the valves, the pressure that was in the hose at the time is still trapped inside the hose. So you can remove the hose or disconnect it with all that pressure still in it, but it's incredibly difficult. So what you can do is, now that you've let go of the dead man switch, so you know fuel's not going to flow anymore, the only fuel that's going to flow in there now, if you open it, is the fuel that's trapped in the hose. So opening up the center fuel tank will allow the pressure to relieve into the center fuel tank. So the fuel load might go up by an additional 10 pounds, which is okay. When the wings are full, you could try that, but because the wings are full, it actually won't relieve the pressure, because there's nowhere for it to release to, but the center tank still has room, so it'll take the pressure away. And if you have your hand on the hose when you do it, you can actually feel the pressure decrease. It's quite a lot. So now that we've relieved the pressure, it's a lot easier to disconnect the hose. You can try it, disconnect it with the pressure in it. You can do it, but it's a lot harder. And the hose is really stiff, and it's just harder to maneuver it. All right. So, and obviously you write these numbers down, because you're going to send these in your electronic device, the final numbers. And I have a feeling it's not going to let me yes, it let me disconnect. Excellent. Last time I've played it, it didn't let me disconnect. So it must have worked properly this time. And we pack that away. And obviously you've jotted all the numbers down from the meter. Obviously that's not depicted in the simulator here, but that's cool. I get why they don't do that. And obviously before you go, just make sure the fuel panel's closed. Occasionally guys do forget to do that. And the ground crew are not allowed to touch it. So what they'll do is they'll have to call up their operations, who will then call your fueling supervisor, who will then call the fueler to say, hey, you've got to go back to the plane and close the panel, you silly dummy. So don't do it. So before you leave, you're about to get in the truck or in your vehicle, just go, yes, it's all buttoned up, good to go. All right, let's go. Because you don't want to get called back, because you've got other flights to do, so you haven't got time to come back and do things you've already worked on. And in this situation, you'd have a marshaller marshalling you back, because obviously you have zero visibility behind you with this sort of truck. This is the best we can do with this view. We just left skid marks on the road. That's cool, I guess.
And there you go. That's all there is to it, to fueling a 737. And we should probably not drive on the taxiway either. And here we go. This is an Airbus, and it's dangerous. I'll do a separate video on fueling Airbuses. These ones are a separate kettle of fish altogether. The idea is the same. I'll just give you a quick rundown. Once again, you'd check your tail number and the ship number, and you would enter that into the details. Let's have a look. What are they asking for? 47,350. It's already it's already fuel on board, and this is why when you come to an aircraft, before you do anything, you always check the fuel panel. Now, with an Airbus, when you open up the panel, if the ground power is on or the APU is running, it'll automatically power up. It'll take it might take a minute or two. No, that's actually when there's no power. So this is as though the aircraft is completely shut down. See, and like I was saying with the 737, there's no battery power. With the Airbus, move that to battery, and it powers it up. Now, the reality is you'd have to wait probably a minute or so. The test button works on this one. The high level test works too. Very good. So that's how you test the light bulbs. And and that's how you test the gauges. Occasionally you'll see bits that don't light up. But this one only allows you to do it in automatic mode. So what you would do is you would set whatever amount you want to set on there. Obviously this one has the fuel on board that they're required already, so you're not going to add any fuel, but that's what you do. You just reselect how much you want to put on there. Move that to up, and then you hold the dead man switch and you fuel. That's it. But there's a couple of errors with this one, because first of all, the wings don't hold 15,430 pounds in each wing. I've seen as much as 14,200, but that was generally on one of those colder days. We were trained to aim for 13,800 in each wing, and the remainder goes in the center tank. And once again, you don't put anything in the center tank until you know you're going to put at least 13,800 in each Airbus wing. It's depicting kilos here, however, it's meant to read pounds. So I've got it set to pounds in this game. I'm not going to show you, it doesn't hold that many kilos. It only holds 13,800 normally in each wing. So, yeah, there you go. So, I'll do an Airbus video separately from this one. But this one does not require any fuel. Oh, yeah, that's right. I've got to turn it off. Right. There you go. Not all Airbus fuel panels are on the fuselage there. My understanding is, I know with the American Airlines, they have some panels that are up here and some that are there where we just saw. And my guess is, I think all the former America West aircraft have it up here, and all the former US Airways aircraft have it over there. And so American Airlines, because they've acquired aircraft from multiple different carriers, they have a mix of the two. And any American Airlines aircraft tail numbers that start with 700, the Airbuses, A319s that start with 700, in the 700s, the fuel panels are up here. There's only one in the fleet that it's actually over there. The ones that are numbered in the 800s, the fuel panels are in the fuselage, and I think they're all US Airways ones, and the old America West ones are in the 700s on their tail number, I think. I'm pretty sure. So there you go, and that's a little tidbit of information. But yeah, I'll do a separate video on Airbus another time. But there goes our 737. She's fueled and ready to go. She's on her way to Phoenix, I think. I don't know. Oh, she's going backwards. That's cool. All right. Well, I hope you learned something, and I'll see you later. Take it easy.